one of the most interesting and unique part of our research, namely the child interviews. Before I will give the floor to my Belgian and Italian colleagues, I would like very briefly to explain the framework of these interviews. Everyone who follows our research knows that we provided already child interviews in the Co-Minor 2 project. In that time, we had interviews with children and set up an experiment whereby we put them in the role of a witness. We posed questions about their perception on the interpreter and the whole encounter. In the CHEERS project, we moved from the experimental cases to the real-life cases and tried to find children who were really experienced in an interpreter-mediated encounter. We designed, again, semi-structured interviews. But before we could start with these interviews, we had a lot of preparatory work. So we, the researchers, received the training from children's rights experts how to behave in an unexpected situation, how to behave if the child has an unexpected reaction on our question. After the training, we prepared the ethical clearance at our universities, at the University of Bologna and at KU Leuven. And then we prepared the informed consents, which was meant for the minors, the parents or guardians, depending on the situation. So this was actually the more administrative part of the preparatory work. But then the real work was to find the children who were willing to answer our questions. And then when we found the children and identify their mother tongue, we had to find the right interpreters and prepare them for the interviews. What was the methodology for this analysis? First of all, during every interview, we recorded the whole interview, audio, and made field notes. Then as a second step, we transcribed these interviews and read it really several times. We annotated, of course, the transcript and generated the different categories. We even color-coded these categories. I will come back to this, which categories we identified. And then we discussed with each other, for example, at the KU Leuven with Heidi Salaets, what was this category? And then we tried to find a consensus. At the end, we put everything in an Excel sheet per minor, per code, fully anonymized. Nobody could read on which child, about which child we were talking or working. So this was the way to achieve our meta-analysis. So the main categories which we identified, the first one was the communication. This is actually for us in our project the most important one, or one of the most important ones. And within this category, we identified the subcategories like needs, emotions, and relations. You can see what the other categories within these categories were. And then, but my colleagues will explain it more in detail. And then the vulnerability, of course. And we will use also the quotes of the children to illustrate their opinion. So I don't want to lose so much time, because the real interesting part of this session is in the presentation of my colleagues. Very shortly, my colleague, Professor Dr. Heidi Salaets, will present the findings, Belgian findings. She is the head of our interpreting studies and research group at the University of Leuven, and she was the coordinator of the Co-Minor 1 and 2 projects, and now the CHEERS project. And Gabriele Mag and Amalia Amato will represent the Italian results, and they are from the Department of Interpreting and Translation in Forlì, the University of Bologna, and they were already involved in the Co-Minor 1 and 2 projects, and of course in the CHILLS project.
Okay. Then I can hopefully continue as Cathy said. So I will present the findings of KU Leuven of Belgium. Of course, I was not alone in this. Stefan Albrecht and Katalin Balog did the research with me and the analysis. So I'm only the presenter of these results. So. Katalin Balog already introduced to you the methodology and how we did the interviews. Now I can be more concrete and show you actually who were the children we interviewed. So all our minors were between 15 and 18. 2 minors were a little bit younger, between 12 and 14. Most languages were Pashto and Dari. There was, if you look at the mother tongue and the way we communicated, we can see that the first minor spoke in English. So he was perfectly capable, of course, with some grammar errors, etc. But we all make grammar errors. So he was perfectly capable of speaking to speak English with us. Then the other minors spoke in Pashto. Minor 5 spoke, his mother tongue was Pashto, but we did the interview in Dari with an interpreter, of course. These were asylum cases. Minor 6 and 8 were also criminal. These minors were involved in criminal proceedings. So this is important for the interpreter who interprets in Dutch. When we refer to quotes of minor 1, it will be in English and you need to translate. But if we talk about the other minors, the Dutch quote will also be present. So the English back translation is for everybody else in the audience. Okay. The minors were mostly interviewed face-to-face, except 4, 5, and 6 were interviewed via video conferencing. You can see also the location. We went 3 times to the asylum center, 4 times they came to KU Leuven, and 1 interview took place at the minors' home with the mother present. The youngest minors also expressed the need to have the guardian present, so they felt safer, and that was of paramount importance for us to let the children feel safe. The categories, I don't have to mention them again because Cathy Balog already did. I'm now going into the illustration of all these categories. Voiced by the children. So that is the main point that we want to illustrate, how children express their meaning about communication and about communication needs. If we talk about communication outside the procedure, we see that they try to communicate in English if they are capable of, and if not, there are all kinds of ways, their own language, even if it's not understood. If you don't have any other means, what can you do? Then speak the only language you know. Sometimes they look for an ad hoc interpreter, sometimes they work with gestures, and if they are here, I mean, in Belgium, then if they are in Belgium since a few months, they use their first skills in Dutch if necessary. So if we look at their comments, you can see that the first minor, who spoke only in English, said, yeah, anyone you ask me, I can express myself. So he was really confident in English. But for example, for minor 6, then I have to press my... Yeah. My back translation: if there were people who were already here since a longer period than I was and spoke better Dutch than I did, then I asked them to interpret for me into Dutch. So clearly the ad hoc interpreter. And if there was no other possibility, you either speak with the interpreter or you try with gestures and with sign language. So that's the illustration of the languages used. The communication during the procedure, so that was outside the procedure, during the procedure, in the assignment procedure, there was always an interpreter present during every interview, at least that's what we can see in Belgium. For the criminal procedure, we noticed, they declared that there was no interpreter at the police station, but there was in youth court. If we ask the minors if they prefer to talk directly or via an interpreter, then every minor prefers direct communication with the authorities in their mother tongue. So minor 4 testifies, I prefer to speak with the authorities in Dari. Then there was no intermediary, nobody who should have had to interpret all that. That would have been much better. So that's the way they think about interpreting. Or they, I mean, minor 4, and we can't generalize more. Minor 5 expresses total freedom if there is no interpreter. You can better express some things without someone being present who sees and hears it all. So it's about confidentiality and about trust in the people present. The other minor 8 says, no, if I want to say something, so he accepts the interpreter, then I told the interpreter. The interpreter has then said it to the other people and vice versa. If they then wanted to speak with me, they have said it first to the interpreter. So he accepted it as it was. If we look at the category of the needs about giving and receiving information, minors have pretty much a pretty good idea of what the interpreter should do. I'm not going to read all of this because we are going through their testimonials one by one. So the interpreter they need an interpreter who has good language skills. So the foreign language and Dutch in the case of Flemish speaking part of Belgium. And so minor 4 says, yeah, I think what I say will be translated to Dutch, and that they will then say in my language what has been said, so I can understand. So for him, it's a natural way of understanding each other through an interpreter that speaks Dutch and his language. Then minor 7, who appears to be a very clever one and can describe very well in a natural way the task of an interpreter, stresses that the interpreter has an important task. Actually, he says, I quote the minor, a crucial task. The interpreter has to transfer what the person is saying in the best way possible in the other language. So the young people, the minors, can very well detect what have to be the skills of the interpreter. If we go a little bit deeper, they want also, a need for them is for language variants, is that the interpreter comes from the same country or the same region as the language variant of the minor. Because, and then we have minor 1, so this is in English for the interpreter, there is no Dutch present. And you see it's colloquial English, and then yeah, the person have to know that we don't speak the same thing, because yes, she can understand a bit of what I was saying, but if I start talking really deeply, she cannot understand because she is not from my country. But this one I did in Brussels, the other interview he means, this one I did in Brussels, the person was from my country, she can understand what I was saying. So he was distinguishing between two kind of interpreters who can really deeply understand or not. What they also detected was that the interpreter should not express his or her opinion. And again, minor 7 has a clear idea on this. The interpreter is not allowed to form or express an opinion. They also need the interpreter not to omit anything. And we have minor 5 who illustrates that. Yes, that interpreter, for example, he's referring to one of his interpreters. I said some things to him and he didn't understand some terms or words and then skipped, he omitted them. So in one way or the other, the minor noticed that some things were not interpreted because the interpreter didn't understand. They don't want, in the interpreting, they don't want any interruption. They don't want interpretation of the interpreter. So here we have a difficult, the terminology interpretation and interpreting. Interpretation here means adding his own opinion or translating what he thinks he should translate, what the interpreter should translate. The minor 7 again says he, the interpreter, has to understand me well. He should know Dutch well, that he doesn't communicate everything immediately, but lets me finish. And if he didn't understand me, then he has to ask me and only interpret afterwards. So not inventing, not guessing, no trying. You have to be sure about what I was saying. So again, at minor 7 has a very clear idea of the interpreter's role. Then they see the interpreter also as somebody who can offer support in other ways. Minor 3, one of the younger ones, said there were things, for example, the interview or the asylum procedure, these things are all new for them, for us, but then the interpreter explained what it was, the asylum procedure. So they expect, just we notice, we see that they expect the interpreter to help in explaining procedures. What they also find very important, and this is to keep in mind for a briefing, for example, explaining the procedure and the whole setting. Minor 7 says, I would have appreciated it if it had been explained to me who exactly the persons present were and what the cause for the interview was. So he is hesitant about who is in the room and who is doing what. About emotions, the second category in the communication, you have all kinds of emotion, positive and negative feelings and other feelings. The positive feelings is again our minor 1 who feels good, who feels self-confident, and he said again, this is only in English for the interpreters. It's okay, the interview is cool, I feel okay at least because I was sitting down confident. I was expressing myself, so no doubts, no panic, and just expressing what I went through because it's an interview based on they're gonna ask you what you went through your life to come to Europe, so you just have to be relaxed and then you express what you passed through. What they don't appreciate, of course, a negative emotion is mood swings of the interpreter, because minor 5 testifies, in the middle of my interview, suddenly the interpreter became angry with me because I understand English and I understood he was talking in English, and at a certain moment in time he said, you talk a lot, you ought to wait for a moment. So the minor didn't appreciate that. Frustration. They minor 5 says also, they ask in the beginning of the interview and at the end whether you understood the interpreter well, but yeah, you can't say it at that moment because he's looking you in the eye. You can't say anything in his presence. So they find it extremely difficult to comment on the interpreter when this person, out of politeness, to comment on his on his performance. I'm sorry. And yeah, if we ask if you could choose the interpreter, say minor 7 says, I can't choose, can I? I would have found it difficult. How can I choose between interpreters if I don't know them and I don't know how professional they are? I mean, that's basically what he is saying. Relations, safety, and trust are very important. We see that all minors have trust in their guardian. Everybody. Trust in the authorities and the interpreter depends. The trust in the guardian, minor one, again, the English speaking one says, because my guardian was there and my guardian knows everything about my story, so my guardian was listening to her when she was translating. So if she maybe mistake anything, my guardian says, no, he used to say this, or he says this or these things. So the guardian takes defends the minor. The trust in the authorities is fine when they see that the authorities are empathic. -5 says, but I had the impression that he really sympathized with me. He behaved very kindly. I could really see it when he speaks about the asylum officer. And there's also trust in the interpreter. -7 says about the first interpreter that he was very pleasant. I could understand the interpreter well. His Somali was good, so I had trust in him that he was able to interpret to Dutch as well. And then, note this one, some interpreters took notes, and I found that better because it is also better for the memory of the interpreter. Some of them only listened. So this -7 even noticed that interpreters were taking notes to as supportive notes for their memory. Thus, distrust in the interpreter is also a reality, because -5 says that my interpreter was from Afghan origin, and I'm not completely sure, but he thought he was different than us. He saw himself as a better person than us. He behaved in a distinct manner. So they feel this distance of the Afghan, or he feels this distance of the Afghan interpreter. And then again, the distrust we mentioned in the beginning, these are your asylum story. This is a private matter. You don't tell this to everyone. And then the researcher asks, but you do to the interpreter. Yes, definitely. But no, I don't trust it. But I have no other choice. I have to tell it there. The second category about vulnerability, if we look at these minors before, for example, one of them, before he arrived in Belgium, he told his whole history, because I asked someone, show me where I can seek asylum. So that is how they save themselves when they arrive. And next you can read about his journey from Sierra Leone to Guinea, Conakry, Mali, Niger, Libya, Europe, Italy, from Italy to Switzerland, Germany, Holland, and Belgium. I mean, this was his journey, and he was 17 when we spoke to him. Linguistic vulnerability, some -7 testifies, I have some broken Dutch, but I try to do it myself. And -4 says that during his journey, he had, of course, no interpreters. Vulnerability during the proceedings is linked with communication. It's increasing when negative emotions come in, when they find themselves disempowered, depending on people that don't act professionally, and when they have the feeling that they have no knowledge about the way proceedings go, who is present and why. Vulnerability is decreasing, as we could see, when positive emotions come in: kindness, respect, empathy, when they discover that the people they communicate with can be trusted. So I don't want to go into too much details on the drawbacks. Of course, one thing I want to highlight is that we definitely would next time involve children also in the design of the questions for the interview, because some questions were too difficult or too general, and so that's definitely one point. So to conclude our meta-analysis, children know what privacy is and prefer to not tell their story to others unless they have to. So, and the others is, and then other people present in the room. They prefer communicating without an interpreter. They want to know who is in the room, and they feel more free without an interpreter. Does it mean that they distrust, by definition, the interpreter? No. it depends on the interpreter. If he has good language skills, included language variants, if he has good listening and comprehension skills, if he can be impartial, if he is complete, meaning that he interprets only what has been said, that he takes note to support his memory, if she can help with practical things, also the asylum procedure, then there is trust. The biggest trust is always for the guardian, but there is trust in the interpreter. So I would conclude that minors know very well what it means to have a professional service from interpreters if we look at their answers, because these are data from children themselves. So we recommend to recruit a professional interpreter, to introduce him or her to the child. That's very important, to make the child feel safe with everybody in the room. As interviewer, express your support and your genuine interest and respect the children's rights. I think this is crucial, because children are vulnerable, yes, but they have a voice, they are resilient, they know, as we saw, what an interpreter should do or not do. They need to be protected and respected, but not paternalized. So let them speak and let's give them a voice, as we tried to do in our research.